My name is Paxton Boyce, and for my media presentation, I felt like focusing on masculinity and how it's constructed in our society. Using that as a frame of view, I wanted to emphasize how we construct masculinity as a society, how that impacts important peoples in our lives, and how that in the long run impacts you as the individual. For my presentation, I focused on a 4-step process of analyzing 2 important male role models in my life, and finding out where they got their masculinity, how that culminates in themselves, and then how that in turn affects me. So, first thing I focused on was how they defined masculinity as a whole. Alright, so we're going to start it off with the baseline question of how do you define societal masculinity? Like, when you think of, like, masculinity in American society specifically, like the one that you've been raised in.
Yeah.
What do you think about? Like, what comes to mind?
Like, don't show emotions.
Like, yeah, don't show emotions.
Just like never.
Never.
Kind of like always be like an anchor, even if you can't be, which is like dumb.
Like an emotional anchor for other people?
Yeah, like in general, like just like constantly be like a strong. Always have to be strong.
Like, if you had to label some place, whether it be like TV or music, where do you think you get like most of your interpretation?
For an example, like TikTok, I'm on like you could say lift TikTok, so everything's about like being like the strongest and like all this, and like if you're not like if you can't bench for like 2 plates, you're not a man, and like stuff like that.
How do you define the societal view in American culture? Like, how do you define that masculinity, like that expectation?
Yeah, so, and I don't believe this is what it should be, but I think the belief is that it's kind of the man is powerful, doesn't admit they're wrong, is action-oriented, gets things done,
Okay.
Not necessarily expressing a lot of emotion, especially tender emotion. More of the emotions expressed are anger, rage, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay, and then so where do you think you see like the best examples of that, like in media, like a TV show maybe, or like a character?
Shows. I'd say a lot of action movies.
Like Rambo, would you say?
Rambo is kind of the quintessential one, I guess. Bruce Willis, in some of his movies, Die Hard, he's kind of a wisecracking action guy, but has a lot of trouble. And actually, even in the movies, it shows that he's unable to express emotion and care to his estranged wife. So it's kind of the loner type. I mean, they can be entertaining to watch on TV, but in a real-world situation, they tend to promote dysfunctional behavior. Display vulnerability. That's the other thing that a lot of the toxic role models, I think, just don't display any vulnerability. There is none there.
After that, I tended to focus more towards the reaction to this masculinity, how your actions and behaviors, temperaments, all are culminated or manifested as a response to this society. Okay. So there's like a standard that men should be a certain way, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever find yourself like feeling like any way in reaction to that? Like do you ever find yourself thinking like, oh, like men are always supposed to be this way and I'm not this way? How would it?
I have an example today.
I
went to wrestling and I painted nails. Probably like 5 people were like, "Damn, you're hella gay," and I was like, "Okay, like it's painted nails. How's that gonna fucking?"
Yeah, but then think about that. Now think about like how did that make you feel? Like just knowing that a bunch of people were like out to get you just because of your nails.
I think it's like they go out of their way to make a personal make my personal choice important to them, like
as if that means much to you.
Yeah, like why would that matter? Like it's nails. How is that like that?
Okay, and then so like if you take all that, think about how that makes you feel. At least when you see through media over and over that men are displayed as like these, like emotionally like inexpressing, cold, like action-oriented, domineering people. Like how does that make you feel about like you yourself as a man?
I think it's damaging to people because I think a lot of men don't want to behave that way or actually start off. I mean, look at young kids, loving, caring, emotional, open, and then it kind of gets hammered out at least the boys when they grow up. And I think a lot of men struggle with that.
Wanting to get more insight on how masculinity could be adapted or changed for the better, I also focused on how these male role models of mine critique or wish they could change societal masculinity, particularly how they themselves challenge it from a day-to-day basis.
So what was the question? Sorry.
The question was more like, what are the most problematic parts of masculinity? Like the things that just jump at you.
The whole like people like can't choose what they want to be, like if they're or like a lot of like men like who want to be like masculine are like transphobic or homophobic and they have to be like racist and stuff.
Like if they put like
a facade on, and then I just think like having to like control women and
or just
like
getting women in the first place.
Yeah, it's just
like it just kind of decenters women as like some sort of like
literally something to conquer,
because it's so
absurd to like think like somebody'd actually think that. But like I have like heard people actually like talk like how many girls they get and like how women are like lesser, like dogs, and then I'm like like you must be joking. Like
you just
I'm like
what are the most problematic aspects of societal masculinity, particularly in American culture?
Well, I think it's breeding conflict, and you see this especially in the political spectrum, where you see some of these right-wing talk hosts talking about how masculinity is being stripped away, and you got to raise men to be monsters and fight back and fight and this and that and attack and don't get pushed back, and it just creates this environment where hostility, rage, and violence is the likely end product. And this whole idea, this masculinity that things we're doing now, like accepting transgender or being open about gay rights, somehow dilutes what it means to be a man. Unfortunately, there's this really big push on the right, and I hate to get political about it, but that's where you see it, is promoting this one brand of masculinity that's the way to be. And it's not, in my opinion, and I think it's just counterproductive.
By the end of the presentation, I think what really stood out to me was mostly how my individual definition of masculinity is so similar to the responses I got from both my personal like role models, I guess. Things like our tendency to respond to question traditional masculinity and our effort to resist or critique it, kind of like calling out its toxicity, really kind of stuck with me. At the end of the day, I'm really glad I was able to get a bit more insight on my own masculinity and to have more awareness about the origins of its cultivation, like the sources of media that affected me most and thus led to me.